Welcome to Happily Ever Aftermath,
the podcast where we discuss relationships in movies and our relationships with them.
I'm Helena Grenbaum.
And I'm Diana Rojek-Sconard.
Hi, Diana. How are you?
Hey, Meg. It's good to see you.
Good to see you.
Yeah, thanks for coming on and joining us for this episode. I think Polina should be here shortly to get us started.
Oh, yeah. About that, I ran into Polina and she asked me to give you this note because she can't make it today.
Oh, wow. Oh, okay. It's kind of weird, though.
She signed it. That's definitely her signature.
Well, okay. Well, I guess this, that's kind of strange. It doesn't seem like, are you wearing her ring?
Oh, yeah. She asked me to hold on to her rings for her.
Oh, that doesn't sound...
Oh, can I make you a martini?
Oh, yeah, that sounds nice.
Great.
Yeah. Well, I guess if she's not going to be here, we can just get started then. That's cool.
Yeah, we might as well go on without her.
Right. And you know what? Thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
I mean, me. Crap. I'm already out of habit. In fact, this is really exciting because this is The Talented Mr. Ripley, 1999, and we are starting Jude-Ly.
Jude-Ly,
because give me one pun, I'll run with it, and I'm very happy about it. And as I have deemed you my Jude Law expert, you're here to enlighten me.
I'm very happy to have the title of Jude Law expert. It was not one I expected to earn during my life, but not sad about it.
Yeah. Okay. Well, if I may,
sure.
I got the description from the Google search. Talented Mr. Ripley, 1999. To be young and carefree amid the blue waters and idyllic landscape of sun-drenched Italy in the 1950s, that's La Dolce Vita Tom Ripley craves, Matt Damon, and Dickie Greenleaf, Jude Law, leads. When Dickie's father asked Tom to bring his errant playboy son back home to America, Dickie and his beautiful expatriate girlfriend Marge Sherwood, Gwyneth Paltrow, never suspect the dangerous extremes to which Ripley will go to make their lifestyle his own. Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's pretty good.
That is pretty good.
Well, I guess if you get too specific, it'll just, this movie's very layered.
Yes.
And, I'll just hand it off to you and your experiences with the movie.
Sure. So one reason why I was excited to talk about this is that it's a movie that just really happened to stick with me from the moment I saw it. Mm-hmm. And in your show, you like to ask people, what was your experience the first time seeing it?
Yeah.
And I'd say most movies, I honestly don't remember my first experience. But there are 2, maybe 3 main reasons why I really remember this movie. So I saw it when it came out in theaters, which means I was 16 years old at the time.
Okay.
And I went with my friend, Janelle. And reason number 1 why I remember this is that we were watching this movie in the theater, and there was the scene where Jude Law steps out of the bathtub completely naked. And
that kind of flew me for a loop when I rewatched it. I'm like, oh, okay.
Yes.
I also am going to look the other direction really quickly.
Oh, well, that was not what I did. And that's also not what my friend Janelle did. And so my friend literally catcalled and whistled in the middle of the theater.
Oh my.
And Jude Law's character's name in this movie is Dickie. And let's just say she went for a very low-hanging fruit of a joke there in that moment.
That's like a double entendre.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
There's lots of entendres.
Let's not talk about low-hanging fruit anymore. Let's go.
So that was one reason why I remember that, is because my friend completely mortified me in a public space. But the second, probably more important reason was, well, if you're familiar with the show, which I'm sure you are, we're going right into spoilers here. So
please do.
Here's a big spoiler. The scene where Tom Ripley hits Dickie over the head with an oar in a rowboat and kills him shortly thereafter.
Right.
And for some reason, the violence of this scene really struck me, no pun intended, in a way that violent movies hadn't really before. Of course, I was 16, so I'd seen a lot of movies. I'm sure I've seen, people getting shot and stabbed and everything like that. And I think the reason why it disturbed me so much was just because of actually how understated the violence was. It was almost like I watched it and I imagined this might be how someone might actually die in real life. And that's why it was so disturbing to me. It wasn't like there wasn't a clear line between the cinematic nature of it and the realistic nature of it.
Right.
And so there's just he has this huge gash in his head. There's blood pouring from his head. The blood is pouring onto Matt Damon. Mm-hmm. And I was like, wow, I feel like I'm seeing someone like actually die.
It was really graphic.
Yes.
But at the same time understated.
Yes.
And it's, I guess, in that level of gore, I do not like horror movies at all. Mm-hmm. So my experience is minimal, but there's also this tension that exists in the movie. Like I use the word a lot, fraught, mm-hmm. the whole time it's going on.
Very tense.
So when you actually see, I think I was reading some reviews saying that as the movie is going on, it's you're on the, you're tense mm-hmm. in a way that's not, it doesn't make that much sense because it's not like someone's stalking somebody, but somebody's in somebody's presence at the mm-hmm. same time. So when actually seeing, blood and gore happening, it's like extra horrific.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's a very tense movie overall. I think that it's a great suspense movie, which is one reason why I really like this. And I think we can go into this a little bit more later, maybe with general thoughts about the movie, but absolutely. Mm-hmm. And just sort of the, I guess, spontaneity of the violence. It's not like Tom got on the boat with the intention to kill Dickie. So mm-hmm. it was very startling and very just sort of disquieting, and it sort of led to the whole idea that anyone can be a murderer in the right circumstances.
Right. Very effective too. Mm-hmm. But at the same time, if anyone who's seen this movie, Tom needs help.
Yes.
Needs help.
Absolutely.
And yeah. I mean, as I was watching this movie again for the podcast, the whole time I was thinking like, I don't know who I'm rooting for right now.
That's a very good point.
And I'm very tense because, oh no, he just did this thing and he might be caught up in this lie. Wait, I think I want him to get caught up in this lie because he is killing people, and I don't have generalized sympathy for identity thieves. And I was also reading on the TV tropes page where in the book, Dickie and Marge, they're just, Dickie is just kind of like, he's not a villain per se. He's just kind of like shallow.
Yes.
Whereas in this movie, he's a horrific man.
Yes.
And I told Plana before about this movie when we were talking about it. This movie, my thesis for it is, I hate privilege. I know that seems like a strange way to go from it, but I'm just like, the conversations between like, oh, when you got Tom, who is being Dickie, Jude Law really needs to stop being in movies where people are him.
Yes.
I mean, the man will never make it in Hollywood. Sorry, Jude Law. No. I mean, if he's just going to keep pretending to be people who are pretending to be people, yes. I'm in a rabbit hole and he's not going to get far.
I mean, call back to the last episode I guested on with Gattaca.
Yeah.
It was, another person impersonating Jude Law.
So now I want to say, like, am I going to be saying Matt Damon as Tom, Matt Damon as Tom?
I think it's Dickie? A little less confusing in this movie.
Okay.
I would say.
All right. So so Matt Damon, as he's just arriving in Italy, he runs into Cate Blanchett's character. I forget her name already. Meredith. I'm like, Marjorie? No, that's Game of Thrones. Okay. So Meredith, Cate Blanchett, and Matt Damon, Tom are coming off, and he's pretending to be a Greenleaf, and they're walking down, and they're just like, oh, you travel under a different name because you're trying to escape your money. I travel under my mom's name too, because yes, I am that insert big name. And oh, it's just, the only people I can talk to are people who have money, but they don't like that they have their money. I'm like, I will be happy to hate my money right now.
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah, Meredith is an interesting character because she's rich and bored, essentially. And she sees Tom's version of Dickie and thinks, here's another rich, bored person.
Yeah.
And yeah, I do think a lot of the movie is about privilege and about haves and have-nots and what you would do to be a have in the world.
Right. So romance.
Yes.
Let's work with that. Actually, let's go back to more of your experience. So you were younger.
Oh, sure.
Was it multiple times in the theater?
I don't think multiple times in the theater, but definitely multiple times since seeing it originally.
And what is the lasting impact of like the first time you walk out of the theater? I mean, granted, the color is out of your cheeks because of what your friend shouted. And then you walk out, and did it just kind of linger in your brain?
It definitely lingered. Going back to the boat scene, it lingered in an unpleasant way because I was honestly quite disturbed by that scene in a way that I couldn't stop thinking about it. And I wanted to stop thinking about it, but then I just kept seeing this image of this person bleeding to death. And then there's that very creepy image that's sort of like a parody of intimacy when he's sort of posed Dickie's body in an embrace in the boat.
That was, you know, I could not deal with that as it was happening. And I'm just like, oh no, even as he's, you know, gone this so violent area and then half fetal position and oh no, you're right. All right, I'm there with you. Go on.
So that image and the image of, I guess, Dickie dying were like really stuck with me. But then on the completely opposite end of the spectrum, I was also a 16-year-old teenage girl, and I was like, damn, that Jude Law person is real hot when he's alive. When he's not bleeding to death in a rowboat.
I will say yes. Attractive man, especially when he's not bleeding. Did you have any just kind of reservations about how he treated Tom in general, or did your 16-year-old brain and his attractiveness override?
Well, what you were saying earlier, I think, is a big takeaway from the movie about who do you root for, and I think that's one of the things that makes this movie so successful and interesting, is that I absolutely had the same reaction of, oh no, he's gonna get caught, especially that moment where the landlady points to him and says, oh hi Dickie, and Freddie is there, and he knows he's been found out, and he tries to hide, and it leads to more murder. but in those moments you think for a second, oh no, he's going to be caught out, and you're just like, wait a second, I'm rooting for the murderer. But yeah, I mean, it's a complicated notion, because the Dickie character, the Jude Law character, he is a philanderer. He's not particularly nice. He's very mercurial in his interests. So he'll be friends with someone one second and then drop them the next when they cease to amuse him.
Like quoted almost verbatim in what's pointed out, like, oh, he doesn't like you anymore. Sorry.
Yeah. There's this great part in the movie where Gwyneth Paltrow's character says that Dickie's attention is like the sun. When it's on you, you feel warm and wonderful, but then when he turns away, you're cold. You're left out in the cold.
Right.
So yeah.
Right. And I identified that, you know, so much the first time I saw that movie, and it was incredibly poetic. And then I thought, oh, that's me as well, because I was always so jealous of my friendships when they would, you know, start hanging out with other people. And then I would just be like, what? I'm also here. And then, you know, we would all hang out together, and I'm like, I am Tom in the
Absolutely.
record store, you know, as he's just like, oh yeah, you go ahead and you go off and do your sightseeing, you know, he's here now.
I think that's a very powerful moment for sure, because, and I think that's another big reason why we root for Tom, is because everyone's had that feeling of being left out, of being excluded. He gets invited to this skiing retreat, and then he's uninvited. And so, you know, there's a natural instinct to want to root for the underdog. We've all been in situations where we're sort of socially ostracized, or we want to be more popular than we are. So even though Tom takes it to obviously an unhealthy extreme, there's so much of him that is so relatable that you find yourself kind of being on his side. And I guess as a 16-year-old especially, what I took away was, I thought Jude Law was very hot. I think it was quite a while until he actually portrayed a likable character, you know. But there was something also kind of magnetic about him and sort of charming. Maybe it was just all in the good looks. But definitely as a 16-year-old wanting to fit in, wanting to be in the in group, I definitely related to Tom.
Oh, absolutely. And I think it's so funny that you mentioned it, because I also was 16 when this came out. So just the isolation of it was very relatable, even though it's happening, you know, they're probably in their mid-20s, I would assume.
That sounds about right.
Like, you know, granted, they're living the amazing life of post-college, this, that, and the other, and flittering about, is that a word?
Sure.
yeah. They're enjoying their lives on trust fund money in Italy. And I'm just like, I just want friends in my high school.
Yeah.
I don't know why I said it that way.
Because everyone talk like that when they're 16.
Because I'm not European. I talk like this. Whoops.
No, for sure. And that's the other interesting thing, too, is because ultimately, obviously, Tom is the bad guy. He murders people. He steals their identity. He steals their money. But they do such a good job of making Dickie likable, but also very unlikable. And of course, Freddie, played by played by Philip Seymour Hoffman, is just so odious.
When I watched it the second time, I'm like, I don't like that I'm rooting for what I know
know.
is about to happen
I
right
know.
now. Chekhov's statue.
Yeah, Chekhov's marble bust.
Did you know who that bust was?
I didn't catch who it was
Yeah,
of,
me
no.
neither,
But
but-
Tom seemed pretty concerned with it.
Right. But and one of the ways he slips, the way Tom slips in and out of character, which is interesting, because at one point he's just very cleaning up after everybody, very conscientious of it. You think it's like a half and half thing, and I wonder if that's how he really is, where he's just, that's his brain coming out. Because he has to be taking in every single detail. And then while he's cleaning, he's able to pick up all these different details.
I feel like his default setting is definitely as a schemer. I don't know if that's intentional or not, but something that I found interesting upon rewatching this movie that I'd sort of forgotten is that he immediately starts pretending to be someone he's not. Even in the first scene, he's caught up in the deception. And I mean, it's a small deception. It's very innocent, but he's borrowing someone's Princeton jacket.
Right.
And so the very moment we meet him, he's not who he says he is. And then he just rolls with it. Other people make assumptions about who he is, and he just doesn't correct them.
Right.
And
why should you
Exactly.
when people are magically nicer to you, more welcoming,
Yes.
and more apt to, I don't want to say provide for you, but let's be honest, he's just like, you probably knew my son. Here's $1,000. Go get it
Yep.
back for me. I'm like, okay, $1,000 in 1950s money.
Yes.
Yeah, I'll say I will have went to Princeton.
Absolutely. Yeah, and going back to the privilege thing a little bit, I don't want to say that Tom is more deserving of having a comfortable lifestyle because, hey, he's a murderer.
Right.
But you see these people who are squandering all of the advantages they have and just sort of frolicking, and you're just like, well, Tom is a nice guy when he's not murdering people.
He's got some heart in there.
So maybe he should enjoy the lifestyle
When
a little bit.
something's not threatening his way of life, he's quite lovely.
He plays the piano very well.
He opens up, and I mean, I will point this out. So when we eventually get to so real life Dickie is murdered, and now there's these seeds of doubt in Marge, because in order for that to maintain the illusion that Dickie is still alive, Tom has to plant these little letters, this, that, and the other, and just kind of make it seem like, well, no, he's out that way, but he'll be back, I promise. And the same way that they were all deceiving Dickie's father to get more money. I mean, she was part of it as well.
Yeah, she was pretty happy to have that icebox.
Yeah.
She didn't have many complaints about it then.
Yeah, exactly. So I'm just surprised that, I mean, I don't even know where her money was coming from, but apparently it's not enough to get an appliance. So we'll work with that. So eventually we get introduced to Peter, played by Jack Davenport. And he is there with Marge after, Dickie has disappeared, and he seems to be like a friend, and they run into each other at the opera while Tom is doing his other scam with Meredith, and it's all complicated and things like that. But eventually it gets to the point where Peter and Tom are interacting, and oh wow, this is a really complicated plot, but but ultimately when they start spending more time together, there is kind of a relationship blossoming there, and it's unfortunately hindered with the fact that he's living this literal double life where he has to be Tom when he's with Peter, but if Meredith happens to be around, he's Dickie, but he knows Dickie.
He has to keep Peter away from Meredith and Marge, because if all four of them were to come together at the same moment, his subterfuge would be instantly unmasked.
But at the same time, brilliantly, when the three of them are together, Tom manages to get Meredith at the exact same spot where Peter and Marge are, and manages to go like, I'm supposed to be meeting Dickie. Wait, but do you know Tom Ridley? And she's like, no, I haven't had the pleasure, but I'm so, again, it's like, I am in so much wonder of the risks that he takes, and at the same time it does manage to pay off.
It's very bold. He's very clever. That scene especially, where he gets them to play off each other essentially exactly how he expected, and they sort of solve his problem in that moment for him, right? Because he's like, I need to get rid of Meredith, but I also need to give Marge the impression that Dickie's still alive and wandering around this area somewhere. So
but just
avoiding
her because he,
very clever.
yeah. And I'll give you this. I don't want to give it too much of a just, on the nose type of thing, but it's like the exact opposite of a rom-com where there's all these misunderstandings and it's just like, well, I was dating him. Well, I was dating him. What are you talking about? But they're talking about two different men who just haven't, it's like maybe the importance of being earnest or something like that. But then they all come together and then everyone, I'm sorry, spoiler for importance of being earnest. And I'm just thinking, oh my God, this is sociopathic opposite rom-com.
That's the perfect way to describe it.
Yeah, I'm gonna run with that.
Should we segue into the couples then about
Sure.
the sociopathic opposite rom-com couples?
Well, I'll first give people a warning. If you've gotten to this point with apologies, we haven't spoiled everything about this movie.
True.
But it's excellent, but I will admit to when I rewatched it, I had to stop it in the middle and just kind of re-get my bearings because I'm just like, I can't handle this anxiety right now.
Very tense.
I have no one to root for. These are all Academy award-winning people and they're very good at what they do, even though I want all of them to perish. Doesn't mean I want to see them. So I recommend seeing it because it's an excellently crafted movie.
All the performances are so good. I'm so glad you brought that up. That's another reason why I really like this movie is that everyone does an excellent job.
Yes.
And shout out to Gwyneth Paltrow. I know that she's won an Academy Award, but sometimes I forget that she can actually act very well. And Marge starts out as such a simple character, it seems like, and then she just gets more and more layers and depth as the movie goes on, and she's kind of a completely different person by the end.
Right. And also when she's sitting there just kind of like working and then Tom comes in, hello Marge, and I'm like, yeah, that's the way you should have been reacting every time he comes in. Good for you.
Tom.
So trusting.
Yeah.
Yes, the couples. Tell me more.
Well, so I asked myself, when did these couples fall in love, if they fell in love? And I think that the closest we have to actual love in this movie is Marge and Dickie. And even that, I think, was maybe one-sided. That Marge loved Dickie, but Dickie didn't actually love Marge, even though he planned to marry her.
Oh, wow. See, I was getting into the realm of it, and with Dickie and Marge, I was wondering, like, he's going to marry her, at least out of his own words. And part of it, as part of this movie, is the reality of things.
Yes.
So I'm wondering if Dickie loved her in his way. And all different relationships have all different types. Like there is this part of the plot that really gives more to Dickie's character where he was having an affair or however you want to describe it. He got another woman pregnant when she asked for help because being a pregnant woman in the 1950s Italy is just all bad around everything. Eventually she kills herself and her body is found in the middle of a ceremony. I wish I knew what they were trying to celebrate, but
it's the Lady Madonna something, but I don't remember.
Something very, very prominent
Yes.
celebration going on, and her body is discovered and her mother finds her and there's just a lot of, commotion happening. And you see him, and even though he's Dickie is very distraught about what's happening, but at the same time, he's just like, oh, it's just, it's just so difficult. And, she came to me and somehow he's just like, again, making it how it was not his fault,
yes.
which they later comment on later, how nothing is his fault. So, he manages to spin it just right. And then like a small piece of reality comes in. I'm willing to wager that he loved Marge.
I would say that too, actually. I think this movie does a really interesting, very smart thing, is that it definitely hints several times at the relationship that Dickie and Marge share off screen. They give these little insights that are like, oh yeah, these characters do continue to live and talk to each other even when we're not seeing it. So we really only ever see things from Tom's perspective.
Oh yeah.
But for example, there's
Great point.
there's one part where Dickie kind of confronts Tom and he's like, you didn't really go to Princeton, did you? And Tom admits, no, I didn't. And Dickie says, I knew it. Marge and I had a bet going.
Yeah.
And there's another moment where he alludes to a conversation that he and Marge had about Tom. And so it's just kind of like, yeah, these characters do continue to interact in ways that we don't see. We only ever see them when Tom sees them.
Right.
And Marge also says that there was a side to Dickie that only she ever saw in their like most private moments.
Right.
And of course she is biased to want to believe that, but I also think that there was truth to that too.
I agree.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's really sad in a way. And it's like, of course you want Dickie to not be cheating on her. But I think they could have had a relationship that worked had they been able to get married.
Not to mention, you know, we have, I mean, especially in our podcast, we have this idealized version of love and marriage.
Mm-hmm.
But that doesn't mean that there weren't, you know, versions of marriage that were happening, you know, like that we'll see now,
Mm-hmm.
like couples and, you know, relationships and open relationships.
Yes.
I mean, if people have like, you know, the ways of making that work and their relationships are successful, you know, congratulations.
Yeah, absolutely.
And it's very possible that they had an understanding that way. And maybe that's why Marge flew off the handle as much as she did, because even though she may have known that he was off with other women, she knew ultimately that, you know, he would come back to her, and she could have been okay with that. We just don't know.
It may have been something like, you can do that, just I don't want to hear the details about it, or something like that.
I mean, some people are fine with that kind of relationship.
Yeah.
I mean, he could, and not to mention, if Dickie's friends with Freddie, who's all about like, you know, cavalier with all this, but he just doesn't have a serious relationship in the, you know, public side.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, Dickie is a version of that. So who's to say that he wasn't also embellishing it even more? But ultimately he really did love her.
Yeah, and in the scene in the rowboat, Tom says something about the quote Marge problem, and Dickie's really taken aback, and he's like, what do you mean?
Right.
I'm marrying her.
Yeah.
And he seems, you know, I think understandably upset that this guy would presume what his relationship is with his fiance. So I think that moment especially, it's like, oh well, you know, I'm seeing some true feeling there. But,
Right.
yeah.
Right. And it's so easy. Again, we're looking at it from Tom's perspective. He's just, you know, this is a bad relationship. Look at the way he's cheating on her. So clearly I know what's happening, and making his own judgments. Never mind, he's a little bit flawed in his own logic, his own realities.
Yeah.
I will point out, though, you know, Tom's perspective, not his perspective, what the movie's trying to show us. When the four of them are on the boat with Freddie and Tom and Marge and Dickie, I'm never comfortable when a couple is fighting and you're trapped.
Or doing other things.
Well, the other thing, though, I'm going to go out on a limb here. Rude. That was rude.
That was quite rude. Yes.
Yeah, that was a little bit rude. And of course, Freddie's just like, what you looking at, Tom? And I'm just like, I hate everyone.
Makes me really uncomfortable.
I hate everyone on this boat right now.
Okay, so again, like, sort of, I guess, feeling bad for Tom. Like, imagine if you accidentally saw your friends having sex. Okay, he didn't accidentally.
There was no accident.
He was, like, purposefully looking. But then having someone call you out on it, how mortifying would that be? Just, that moment is so cringy. It makes me feel so uncomfortable.
I'm uncomfortable. I hate everyone.
The whole boat can just sink. Maybe Marge can swim away. But.
Yeah. And also, I'll say it again, gives to the whole charisma of Dickie's character. It's just so angry at him. And then he says a couple of things. I don't know. I didn't have the subtitles on at the time, but clearly it worked.
Something worked.
Clearly it worked. Or they have such a shortcut language
that
he's able to just instantly get back in her good graces.
Yeah, that's true.
And by that, I mean underwear.
That's a good euphemism.
Oh, thank you.
I'm going to use that now.
Oh, I have to be careful now every time I use it. Oh, wow. So that's, you know, probably the most prominent relationship in the bulk of the movie, you know, until the murders start happening. I mean, Tom and Dickie, I mean, in our Gattaca episode, you had some interesting insight before. Do you have anything similar that maybe us regular viewers might have?
So Tom is interesting because obviously my understanding of the book is that there's sort of homoerotic subtext. I haven't read the book, but that's what I've heard about it.
Okay.
Whereas they make it more text here that Tom is either bisexual or possibly gay. But I think this will lead into our discussion of Tom with Peter as well. I personally don't think that Tom has the empathy to truly love anybody.
Okay.
So I think that while he maybe had flirted with the idea of something sexual with Dickie, I think that was more maybe him just wanting so much to be Dickie, to love Dickie as he would maybe love himself. I think that Tom is sort of this like ultimate narcissist. So even though there's that bathtub scene and he says like we love each other, and he sort of couches that in this kind of brotherly love, but then he also says, oh, the only reason I've labeled it as brotherly love is because you, Dickie, are too afraid to acknowledge anything else. But I don't think that Tom did actually ever love Dickie. I think it was more like, I want to completely subsume this guy's identity.
Okay.
And my way to fully know him is to like maybe biblically know him.
Wow. Oh, that's a really good interpretation.
So that's kind of how I interpreted it. And I think that sort of really goes into how Tom feels about Marge too. But maybe we can go into that in a moment.
No, that's actually pretty cool, because when Marge is becoming more and more suspicious, she finds, so there's a ring that Dickie wears that he has promised her he will never take it off. And so when she finds it in Tom's possessions, naturally that's, going to set off all these things. And I'm actually surprised he didn't use that as an excuse to say, no, he gave them to me because he said you didn't matter anymore.
Yeah.
I'm surprised, but I'm also wondering if that's going back to the relationship that they had that we don't know about, that, he would never do that. So maybe he was actually smart enough to know not to lie to her that way.
That's true.
Yeah. So dang it, we're making this like off the screen, deep embedded relationship happening.
That's true.
Dickie and Marge
Subtext.
forever.
I ship it. On literal ships.
Yeah.
But maybe not. Those are bad for Dickie.
Yeah, no, it doesn't work out for him. Oh, no. So like, so motor powered, no oars.
No oars.
No oars.
No.
Okay.
Only sailboats.
That's okay. Okay. Oh, wow. So in that particular instance, Marge is becoming more aware of that. And in turn, Tom turns that into, I got you the perfume, Marge. It was me that did that. So, I'm in love with you.
Yep.
And I'm like, is this like the worst version of him trying to get out of something? Or is it what you were saying where he was trying to really make a transformation?
Yeah, that's my interpretation of it, is that he says outright, I love you, Marge. And he says, like, you can write that down and save that for a rainy day, which is a very disturbing thing to say. But I do think that was an extension of him trying to be fully Dickie, to be the best version of Dickie, is like, well, Dickie loved Marge. So if I'm going to be Dickie, then I have to convince Marge that I love her too.
Right.
So I think that it was just him taking his impersonation of Dickie's life to the next level.
I'll even say that when you're supposed to see Tom doing impressions of people like Dickie's father and Dickie themselves, if anything, it was just like, is this just bad ADR? Or it's kind of freaking me out in the way that's not intended. It's supposed to be like, oh, it's uncanny because the way he can do their voices. I'm like, no, it just sounds weird coming out of his mouth.
It just looks like he's smirking.
Yeah, I'm a Dickie.
I could say that his Marge impersonation could use some work. I like him. His falsetto was maybe not the best.
There was more work to be done there. More practice there. Yeah. And all these incidents, I do feel bad that Marge just kind of flies off and goes to all these things. And while she's screaming things, everything she's saying is right though.
Yes.
But because again, the TV tropes page, you're screaming at towards the world, and it sounds like you're just flying into the realm of not good.
Yeah, it's very frustrating that Marge is definitely on to Tom. She knows what's happened and that literally no one will believe her. And I think that this is maybe sort of the time period too, the late 50s. Of course, no one's going to listen to a hysterical woman, and the father is just like, well, boys will be boys. And I'm sure that he confided in Tom things that he would never confide in Marge. So yeah, that was quite frustrating on Marge's behalf.
Right. And it doesn't help that, all these little things are going off. But I don't even know where to go. I'm just so frustrated with all of that. And of course, it just, again, things are, it's a reverse Psycho rom-com again, where everything is just slowly falling into place. So Tom can get his happily ever after of taking over Dickie's life. The circumstances.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Did you want to talk about the couple that, I know there's one more couple.
Oh, okay. I'll do it, even though it okay. So in turn, when Tom is pretty much threatening to kill Marge, and she's trying to get out of the apartment. Peter comes in and is the reason that, because Tom actually gives him the key to his place, and it's just
no, sorry. I think it was an implied booty call with that key. But
oh, dang it! I was all more romantic with it because
I'm sorry.
He was having nightmares.
Oh, that's true.
And then Marge came in, and so he Tom is all scrambling, and it just looks like, do you want me to come back later?
Yeah.
You made it a booty call, and I made it a moment of tenderness of just like, I saw you were distraught. I know you.
It could be a moment of tenderness that goes different places later.
So a different kind of spooning that was on the boat before.
Yeah.
But this time they're both alive.
Less murdery.
Oh, wow. For now. I was, you're not wrong. I was very, okay, full disclosure, I believe I saw this movie and then I saw it before I saw the Pirates of the Caribbean movie. So, but I loved the first Pirates.
Yes.
And I loved Jack Davenport, who plays Norrington, but I hated that he was the heel, basically.
Yes.
He's not the villain, he's the heel. And so I'm just watching him, and then as the movies progress in the Pirates, I'm just like, yeah, redemption arc, my friend. Take that wig off and go get yourself some not Keira Knightley. Because she's spoken for. But, unless you all have an understanding, in which case I'm not judging.
I mean, I think that all of those leads in that movie should just, get it on together.
Wait, which movie are we talking about?
Pirates of the Caribbean now. Sorry, I got off track.
Oh, I don't know. The franchise went in so many different directions.
True.
I'm not really sure.
True. I feel like I'm writing on the air fan fiction this whole episode. I'm sorry.
What's the problem? I'm okay with all of this.
Yeah, okay.
So, and it kind of goes in different ways too. So as much as I enjoy Jack Davenport, anytime I see him in a movie, it's few and far between, unfortunately. Yes. But I will say that I have watched the movie The Wedding Date many, 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 many times. And while you have this person who's the star of it, he's actually just the guy in the fiance. And for anyone who has seen that movie, that's the opposite Pretty Woman movie where Deborah Messing gets a male escort to be her date for her sister's wedding because the best man is also her ex-fiance, so she wants somebody gorgeous on her arm. And Jack Davenport is also there. But he plays the sweetheart fiance who just wants everyone to get along. Yeah. And he's in love with his, fiance, the younger, blah, 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 blah. So there's parts in there that I just watch over and over again because he's so great. And and for all I know, he has this long list of credits where he's just like the most depraved, sick, I don't know what. But I don't think we should let that stop us.
No, he's great in this movie.
So the point is, what? Where was I going?
Peter,
thank you. Peter, he's very gentle with Tom. He's concerned about him. I'll give you this much. The man is doing some sort of European tour as a musician. So whatever type of money he has, he's not flaunting it. He's like living a dream of some kind. So I'll give the writers credit for that, not making me hate him there.
Sure, yeah.
But when Tom goes with him to the police because there's suspicion that quote unquote Dickie killed Freddie, and he goes with him, and Tom has this thing where they can't cross jurisdictions, but ultimately there's a conversation in there where they accuse Tom of being a homosexual, and it's actually a really great thing back and forth where the detective asks him in Italian, are you homosexual? Peter asks him that, and then he goes, no, and then Peter looks at the detective and translates, no. So there's that part of it. And again, he has the nightmare and he comforts him. He gives him the key that you call the booty call. Tomato, bootay, booty, whatever you want to call it.
Yeah.
There was something there that I thought was really interesting. And again, because I have this built-in affection for Jack Davenport characters, I just found them to be so wonderful, especially in the scenes where Tom is talking about like the key, because him giving him the key to his apartment had an earlier conversation took place where he's talking about how you just have your past and you just want to bury it.
Yeah.
For the record, if anyone ever says to you, do you ever just want to take your past and bury it in the basement and lock it up and throw away the key?
In the dark where no one can see it.
No one can ever see it.
And if they're sort of playing with a long piece of clothing that could potentially be used to strangle you, that's a red flag too.
Yeah, that's a couple of red flags right there. And one of Peter's flaws is that he hears this conversation and goes just like, I think you need to play some happier music. And then he just starts massaging his shoulders. I'm like, oh, honey, no. Sweetie, red flag.
No.
Red flag.
Get out of there.
This is like maroon and burgundy flag. So there's that part of it. And what I think is amazing is that I'm hearing all of this every time he talks about, locking away his feelings, being in the basement. I'm like, basement? Closet? Are you trying to like say something that's kind of unspoken? I don't even know if they, you say booty call. Have they been calling earlier and it's supposed to be implied, or do you think they're just kind of like slowly making sure that?
I think that what we've seen of their relationship is what the relationship is.
Okay.
I don't think that there were any off-screen moments that we didn't see.
Okay.
I don't think it really was a booty call, but I do.
Oh, now I'm disappointed.
Well, okay, maybe I was taking it a little bit to the extreme. I guess what I'm really trying to say is that I think that Tom was open to that idea and he was maybe trying to encourage it. And I'm not really sure what his expectation was of going with Peter on the boat in the end. I don't know what he anticipated or wanted to have happen as far as that relationship goes. Tom is very interesting because it's like, well, let's talk. We are talking about this relationship. To talk about it a little bit more, I don't think that Tom really loves Peter. I think that maybe what Tom sees in Peter is that. Okay, let me rephrase that a little bit. The thing that I do think is unique about Peter to Tom is that this is the only relationship we've seen in the movie where Tom is acting for himself. Tom is doing something that Tom wants to do, not something that he thinks Dickie would do. Of course, he wouldn't think that Dickie would be in a relationship with Peter. So what Peter and Tom have is strictly Tom being himself.
Right.
So I do think that there might be some sort of real affection there, but I guess why I say it doesn't go into love is that I just think that Tom is, like we said, a sociopath, that he lacks the necessary empathy to truly reciprocally love someone. I think he was trying to get there with Peter. I think this is maybe the first time in his life where he maybe felt a deeper, more authentic emotion than he's ever felt before.
Oh, I agree with that. It actually breaks my heart to agree with you at the same time. When they're on the boat at the end, and it's so cute. It's like they're on a vacation, but they have their separate rooms. I noticed after the movie was ending, you have Meredith who appears, and she's there with her like entourage of family and people. So at this point, Tom has managed to get enough of non-rom-com circumstances to, it turns out after Marge says like, oh, we talked to his father, Dickie's father, and he's going to come out and he's hiring a private detective. What happens is that the detective, is called in, and Dickie's father's just like, Marge, we should have a talk with Tom. Can I take you out for a second? And then as they're calming down hysterical Marge, who thinks that he's been murdered and all this other stuff. The accurate
the real truth of the matter.
At the time, we have these other circumstances of the detective finding, well, as much as Dickie's father wants to believe all of this, and, I understand, let's look at facts, becoming facts. And he instantly knows Tom's background because he looked into some facts. But it also turns out Dickie was very violent, I guess broke a guy's jaw over a girl. They found out about, not just there's a faked suicide note that makes reference to the woman he got pregnant. But he's like, not only that, but it turns out that he was alluding to more women out there that are, part of that. So we're just basically Dickie's father is very upset with all of this. It's like the half and half. Even though his son was murdered horrifically, he's choosing to believe, well, my son did all this, so let's just let's just, I don't even know if his father thinks that he may still be alive and fleeing.
I think that is what he thinks.
That's what he thinks? Okay. That makes more sense.
That was my reading of the movie.
Okay, that does make more sense. So my son did all these things. He's fleeing. I'm just going to let him go. But Tom, great job. Please take all of this money. Actually, that does make sense, because why would he offer Tom the money? Unless he thinks that Tom will be filtering the money to Dickie as a loyal friend.
I think that the dad just thinks that Dickie will pop his head up later when things have cooled down. And I think he was just sort of trying to maybe subtly bribe Tom to keep a lid on everything. You know, like don't go telling people that Dickie got this other girl pregnant, etc.
Oh crap. That kind of clouds my thoughts of what's going to happen. But that's okay. Well, this movie will mess with you that way.
It will. Yeah.
I mean, again, I'm still thinking about it, still upset about many things about it, and not just the murders. Oh, jeez. But a lot of the murders are upsetting. After all that's said and done, Tom gets to go off, but while he's on this, cruise, we'll say, like mini version 1950s cruise, Meredith is on the boat as well, and, he's like, oh, opportunity. And he's still Dickie, because that's how she knows him to be. And after he kisses her and says, I'll come see you with you later, he goes back to Peter, but he also says to her as he leaves her, he's like, oh, did I see you with Peter before? Like, no, I don't. I haven't seen him I'm just here by myself. And when he goes back to see Peter saw them. He's very upset. And
because they were kissing.
And going back to what you were saying about you're not sure about where the relationship was, I'm wondering if there wasn't like too much physical. I don't know where it is, but there's clearly a bunch of affection happening on.
I think
that
they
point.
both, felt that there was something between them, but I think that neither of them had acted on it physically yet.
Interesting. Okay. I myself think that there had been some action.
Okay.
So that's where I was just like extra hurting my feelings. I mean, there is this part where he said, you were talking to Meredith, and Tom responds with, Dickie and Peter on a boat together. We don't need that kind of gossip spreading about. He's like, well, what about even just Tom and Peter, basically like trying to have that conversation of, well, what's wrong with that? And well, the answer is it's 1950s Italy slash 1950s / whatever you want to call it. Or sadly, in certain circumstances, 2019. Yeah. Never. I'm sorry. I'm going to get back. Let's get back to it. This movie is way too relevant.
It is.
So for me, when I heard Tom actually say, we don't need those rumors to go flying about, even though he knows it's not really going to hurt Dickie in any way, especially since Dickie's out there, whatever, I thought there was some part of him protecting Peter.
I see.
Like, it's like he actually had a brief moment of like, I know that this would ruin you somehow. And even as I'm trying to explain it, I'm just like, did I really just latch on to that? Because if he is still Dickie, that doesn't make any sense either. And he is still protecting himself. I'm really fighting for this couple.
That's really interesting. I guess the way I would interpret that and other parts of the scene is that I think that Tom is really trying to figure himself out. I think that Peter has sort of maybe awoken emotions in him where he's just like, I don't know what to do with this. I don't know what this even is. And I think that his saying, we don't need those rumors flying about, I think that was kind of a way of testing the water. Like, what is Peter's response to this going to be? Like, Peter's either going to say, I don't care if there are those rumors. And he could be like, yay, okay, I'm going to see that as a green light to go forward with this. Or he could say, or he might expect Peter to be like, oh, you're absolutely right. We need to nip this in the bud right away.
Oh, wow.
So I think it was him trying to figure stuff out. And I think going further in the scene where he says to Peter, tell me good things about Tom Ripley, I think he can't even realize who he is in any way whatsoever.
Right.
So he's like, I need someone else to tell me who I am.
Right. Oh. And then the sadness happens.
Well, so do you think Peter says that there's someone to love Tom? And obviously he's alluding to himself.
Yes.
So do you think that how in love do you think Peter was with Tom?
I think Peter was in a very comfortable place of being with him, being able to live a life. I mean, I imagine Peter had the opportunities to live that life, but just very quietly. So I think the fact that he found somebody who's like has his feet in that life, I'm like creating this entire backstory with Peter. I can see him having relationships with people with like, I don't want to put it this way, but it'll get the point across, the help, you know, where it's just like, oh yeah, we're having this thing, but now you're going to go off and do this thing and I'm going to go to my boarding school. So we're good there. But actually having it with somebody who's part of the upper elite, I think there's something there that's just a little bit more, kind of like with Meredith saying, like, it's so nice to, you know, connect with somebody who understands. And even though he knows that Tom isn't part of like financially the group, because Tom has actually been, in a cheaper apartment with Peter's help. So he understands he's not there, but he also knows the world. So it's probably part of it. I think I'm not saying it's like full on, you know, in love operatic singers, although there's a lot of that in this movie.
There is.
But I think there's a lot of affection there, and it's blooming and it's blossoming because there's a lot, in that short time. In my head, Peter is also very conservative in that he's not just going to give his heart away because it's not so easy. But I think he's given a lot.
Yeah,
a lot.
Yeah,
especially with a lot of like heightened circumstances around with like murdering of people that he knows, and his friend March being a little bit like, ooh.
Yep. Yeah. Poor Peter. He's definitely, unquestionably, the most likable character in this movie, and never did anything wrong, and then gets straight up murdered, loitered.
And you were saying the first time you saw it, that scene haunted you. Seeing Matt Damon's face while the sounds of their last conversation together haunted me.
That was something that I felt they did very interestingly in this movie, is that it's a quite violent movie, and aside from the part where Dickie is killed, pretty much all the other violence is off screen, and you just hear it or you see a little snippet of it. Like even Freddy's death, you don't see him. Well, I think maybe you see him getting struck over the head once, but the rest of it you don't see, and you just see the bloody marble bust. And same with Peter. I'm assuming being strangled to death is what happens, and you just hear the noises and Tom sobbing, and it's really effective. It's so smart to leave it up to your imagination because it makes it kind of even more nightmarish than what they might have shown you.
Correct.
Yeah.
Oh, I agree with you. Yeah. It's now I'm wondering if the rated R was not because of the violence, but because of the butt shot.
Well, it probably was, because it was more than just a butt shot, and
I was turning my head the other way.
Well, actually, there was a small sort of sidebar I had. I won't go into it too much, but this movie did actually really get me thinking about just violence in movies in general.
Sure.
And I would really recommend this documentary called This Film Is Not Yet Rated.
Oh, great movie.
Excellent movie. So you know all about it. But so for the listeners, it essentially explores how permissible American moviegoers and movie makers are of violence, whereas they censor and rate sexual scenes much more like conservatively, and it's just kind of baffling how much we as a culture embrace violence but then get freaked out about sex. So yeah, I would recommend that documentary, and I think that this movie actually first got me thinking about that topic and I am a product of that, you know, environment, because all these movies where just sex, sex, bad. I started watching that documentary, and they instantly showed, NC-17 clips for movies, and I'm just like, I'm not used to this. Right.
Yeah.
Well, and another interesting thing that movie pointed out was that queer sex tended to get much higher ratings than heteronormative sex, and it was just because of the people involved. And another very frustrating thing about that documentary was that they pointed out that consensual queer sex often earned a higher rating than rape. And it was just like, this rating board is very bonkers, and we don't even really know who's on the rating board or what their credentials are.
Right.
So it's really hard to hold these rating people responsible for, like, what's your deal?
Right. And I can see a protection thing as the reason why we don't, but I don't know. I would be horrible on this board, because I'll just be like, that's fine. Wait, no, I'm old and I've seen things. Never mind.
Yeah, but yeah, I think that this movie kind of raises those questions too.
Sure.
But,
oh, wow. Yeah. And bleh.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, here's what's kind of interesting in the what happens next. Have you seen, or you haven't read the books?
I have not, but I read a little bit about
Okay.
the books going into this conversation.
Oh, okay. And then there's also another one called Ripley's Game, which stars John Malkovich.
Oh.
I don't remember when it came out, but I remember hearing about it. It just kind of came and went. So
There was also another movie adaptation of this first book called Purple Noon.
right.
But I have not seen it. Have you seen it?
I have not. Yeah. And I just, I don't know. I was just kind of, I got into a kind of a spiral where I'm just like, other movies that were also, you didn't know were a remake. And I'm like, oh, okay. Well, there goes my research. Like, that was interesting.
Yeah.
Wait, I knew about that one. And then I moved on to the songs that you didn't know were remakes. I'm like,
That's quite the rabbit hole. You'll just keep going with that for sure.
Yeah.
Because everything's a remake. Not everything, but
Right.
it truly is surprising.
Most things.
Yeah.
Yeah. Or an homage.
Yeah. Yeah.
Or plagiarized. Okay. So do you have anything about what happens next? Or are we just going to leave Tom crying in the boat forever?
What happens next? So in the book series, and it is a book series, is the interesting thing, is that it's one of the few book series where it follows the villain through multiple books. Or, well, I guess if you want to call Tom the villain and not the anti-hero.
Okay.
And, well, I guess it's your interpretation, but so people can correct me if I'm wrong, but my understanding is that in the books, there actually wasn't a Peter character, and that the ending of the first book was quite different than the ending of the movie. And I think that that's interesting because even after the very first time I watched the movie in theaters, I remember thinking, how does he get away with murdering Peter?
Oh, yeah.
Because I honestly don't see how he could. And since the murder happens off screen, I was thinking to myself, did he get rid of the body in some way? Did he toss the body overboard? And I was thinking, if he tossed the body overboard, maybe he'd get away with it. But if he just left Peter's body in the room, that's just so highly suspicious, especially when you consider all the other murders and disappearances surrounding Tom.
Correct.
So I guess what I think happens after the movie, and I think this would be the most poetic thing, was that ultimately Peter's murder, I think, will be what leads to Tom's capture. I don't know if it'll happen right away, but I think it'll come to light that Peter's missing or he's dead. Marge is already on high alert because of what happened to Dickie, and she's good friends with Peter. Yeah. So Marge is certainly going to notice that Peter went missing. And Meredith still doesn't know that Tom is Tom. She still thinks that Tom is Dickie Greenleaf. But I think that Marge will talk to Meredith at some point because we know that they run in the same inner social circles.
Right.
So I think eventually it'll come to light that this person that Meredith keeps talking about, Dickie, and Marge will be like, wait, Dickie's dead, because she so firmly believes it now. So I think eventually Marge will be instrumental in putting the pieces together. Maybe they'll get like a sketch artist or something to be like, hey, Meredith, describe this Dickie Greenleaf person, and she'll draw a picture of Tom, and she can say that, she saw him with glasses and things like that. So I think ultimately it's going to catch up to Tom and that he's going to be arrested for one or multiple murders. But that's also just my sense of justice, I guess.
Yeah.
I think ultimately I don't really want him to get away with it. He's very smart. I think he'll elude the police for a while because he's great at impersonating other people, and it's the 50s, so it's probably a lot easier to assume an identity. So.
I was thinking that myself, it's just like all it takes is just like, okay, I've left. And then that's all there is.
Yep. Especially if he goes to another country where he's not going to run into Dickie's friends, So no beautiful villas in Europe. He could probably go to Canada or something.
Right. And do we actually believe that all these people who are in this Princeton class just happen to all be in the same area?
He got really unlucky with running into Meredith often.
Oh, yeah, I know. But, when you're a socialite, lots and lots of money, but don't want your money. Oof. Dang it, Meredith.
Cate Blanchett, why are you so unlikable in this movie?
I know. And yet she's still likable-esque.
She is.
As compared to others.
She's very charming.
Yeah. Well, we knew that.
Yeah.
All right. Well, no, I'm that's a really good point. In fact, I was just too busy being upset about the end of the movie. I was just like, how is he going to get away with this?
Mm-hmm.
Why am I still quote unquote rooting for him? I guess it's more just the question of how.
Yeah.
But I honestly think that the body's going to start stinking.
Yep.
And I'm just like, wow, will they have housekeeping? Like,
well, see, I think that if he didn't toss the body overboard, I think that he would, make some excuse for like, don't go in that room.
Right.
So then the crime won't be discovered until they reach port somewhere.
Yeah.
By that time, he will have hightailed it out of there.
I think so.
So I don't think that he would have been arrested immediately.
Right. Agreed. Especially if they were just kind of hanging out in the rooms as much as they were. I can see, just being something. Honestly, I think he's just going to get off the boat and bolt. I don't think he's going to throw the body overboard because it's too much of a risk.
Yeah.
When you can just put the imaginary "Do Not Disturb" sign on the handle and call it a day.
You could put a little note that says "Do Not Disturb" and
exactly
fake people's signature.
Yeah. Exactly. Awesome. Well, not so much the sad ending, but thank you.
Oh, thank you
for coming to talk about this.
Of course.
And we're going to continue Jude-Ly, so we would love to have all of your expertise.
Well, yeah, let's try to make our schedules work. I'd love to talk about Jude Law more. Maybe when he's actually, has something happy happen to him.
Okay.
Maybe not die.
So I'm not too familiar with his entire IMDb, but I do believe my husband and I have on our list of movies to watch Existenz.
I love Existenz.
Okay, he's going to be very happy you're saying that, because every time he asks me, he's like, do you want to watch it yet? I'm like, I don't know.
That is one of my favorites.
Okay. Ryan will hear that, and then I will be on the hook for it. But don't assume that's our next movie. We're going to continue Jude-Ly. And what's great is that it's going to be my own pick. It's something that just kind of like fell into my grabbing from Blockbuster days. I assume, again, I can't remember, but it's this movie called Music from Another Room.
Excellent.
Yeah. And are you familiar with it?
I believe I saw it.
Okay.
But I honestly do not remember a single thing about it.
Yay! So clearly it's way up there in your heart. Yeah,
well, it's a legit rom-com, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
That explains
just the
why
premise
I don't
of it by
remember
itself.
it.
Yeah, okay. Legit rom-com that's forgettable. Woo! Back to our roots.
Back on brand.
Aw.
I'm just kidding. Your show is not forgettable. Not by any means.
Oh, well, that's going to be our new poster tagline. Not forgettable and by any means. Oh, well, that's awesome. Okay, well, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Again, and, for taking Polina's spot. For those of you who are honestly concerned, Polina is unfortunately ill, but she shall be back.
Yeah, I miss not having this conversation with you, Polina. I'm sorry that you couldn't make it.
Yeah, give me that ring back, by the way.
Oh, okay, here you go.
Thank you. All right.
You're welcome.
So please let us know what you think about Jude Law movies, sociopathic rom-com in reverse movies, and anything else that you think would be great. You can reach us at our email. We're contact@HEAMCast.com. You can tweet at us at HEAMCast, HEAMCAST. We're on Facebook at Happily Ever Aftermath. And Meg,
yes,
with all of your wonderful projects and also podcasts. And go ahead. How can they find you?
Yeah, so my name is Meg. I'm from the Indoorswomen podcast. I host that with my BFF, Jen. It's a pop culture podcast with a positive spin. So we talk about movies, books, TV shows, comics, fandoms, all sorts of pop culture and geeky things. Plus, we play silly games and have random recommendations for you. So that's Indoorswomen. You can find my podcast at Indoorswomen on Twitter. I'm at Meg Writes Words. And I also have a murder mystery novel called Red Tea. So if you're not done thinking about murder mysteries yet, you can check out my book, Red Tea by Meg Mezeske.
Thank you again.
Thanks for having me.
All right. Until next episode, thanks for joining us.
Bye.